Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Oregon Trails Coalition's Oregon Trails Funding and Assistance Opportunities webinar. We're really glad you're here to join us today. I want to invite folks who are joining the webinar, if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat, and if you want to choose the option for everyone as opposed to just hosts and panelists. I think it's nice for folks who are joining to get a sense of who else is here with us today. So if you'd like to share your name and either where you are zooming in from or any organization or agency you're a part of, want to invite you to do that. We've got a great list of presenters with us today. And I'm really glad to have them all here. We invite you at any time to put questions in the Q&A. We'll try to keep an eye on the chat as well, but it's a little bit easier to track with the Q&A. We'll have time for questions and answers at the end of the webinar, but we might also have a quick we might respond to some kind of quick clarifying questions as we go. But if we don't get to it with our individual speakers, hopefully we'll have time at the end. We are recording this webinar and we'll share the recording and links to the funding programs that folks cover on our blog afterwards. And I wanted to just give a little bit of overview of some resources and kind of framing for thinking about trails funding before we get started. One is there's a resource on the Oregon Trails Coalition website called Ready, Set, Plan. That is a introduction to trail planning and development that might help folks who are maybe newer to thinking about trails development and planning and seeking for funding, think about all of the different parts of a trail project life cycle and think about various partners and how the different partners' roles might come together for seeking funding. Or yeah, just kind of thinking about the various parts of the process. And so I wanted to make sure folks are aware of that resource if you're not already. And like I said, one of the things that guide breaks down is kind of the different parts of the life cycle of a trail project. You may notice as folks talk about funding programs today that some of these funding programs are better suited towards different parts of this life cycle. So that's just something I invite you to kind of keep your ears open for so that you can think about where your project might be in this life cycle. And the other thing I wanted to invite you to think about today, and as you move forward and trying to find funding for trails too, is how is your project kind of best poised to meet the different goals or kind of values assigned to different funding sources. And your project likely is gonna be, particularly strong in some of these categories, and that might also help you find the right funding source for your trail. So without further ado, I'm gonna stop my screen share and I am gonna introduce the first of today's speakers and welcome Jodi Bellefeuille who's going to speak about Oregon Parks and Recreation Department grant programs. Welcome, Jodi.
Great. Thank you for the introduction, Steph, and thank you always for hosting these awesome webinars. I'm assuming you can see my slides that we just tested, so I will just
looks good.
Jump right in. Thanks. Hi to everyone joining in today. Thanks for taking time to come watch this today. I'm Jodi Bellefeuille. I'm a grant coordinator at the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, or Oregon State Parks, as you might know us a little better. And I'll be giving an overview of the different grant programs that we administer here at OPRD. So on your screen are the 5 statewide recreation grant programs that can fund trails and other types of outdoor recreation facilities. Today, I'll just give a very brief overview of each of these programs. But for more detailed information, I just dropped a link in the chat there, and that link will take you to our website where you can find a list of all of, it didn't go to everybody. So Steph, if you could share that with all the attendees, that'd be great. You can go on our website to learn about all the programs after the webinar today. And I also just want to highlight there's different staff that work with each of our programs. We're here for you to answer your questions. So don't ever hesitate to email or call us as you're navigating the different resources and jumping into a grant application potentially. So here's just some general information about all of our grant programs before I go into the specific programs. So the primary types of projects that our agency's program funds are the development and restorations of trails, trail facilities, of course, other outdoor recreation facilities like playgrounds and sports fields, but today we'll focus on the trail component. And we can also fund different things like land acquisitions and some other project types that I'll recommend I'll expand on once I get into the different specific programs. And because we mostly fund construction projects, your proposal should be fairly shovel ready when you apply. Of course, we do allow some final engineering and planning to be included in your proposals. And as far as what types of organizations can apply, that does vary by grant program. So I'll go over that on each program slide. And 2 of the 5 of our recreation programs are open to nonprofits. So for some of your projects, there might be a choice that you'll make as far as who the applicant will be. And our staff can always help you work through those decisions if you're not sure. As far as funding for all of our programs, these are competitive, some more than others. If awarded, we do issue funds on a reimbursement basis as work is completed. We do have some ability to make partial advance payments if that's an issue for you. There are limitations that apply to that. So if that is a concern you have, you can reach out to our staff and we can talk to you more about that. Each program also requires a match contribution. So that would be a match that you're contributing towards the project expenses, either with cash or other grant sources. But we can also count things like your in-kind labor, volunteer labor, and other things that we can tack a value onto. And if you do receive a grant from our agency, grantees get about 2 years to complete their projects. So that goes back to the piece about shovel readiness, that as you think about when it's the right time to apply, just thinking about that in that 2-year perspective, that you'll have 2 years to complete everything that you are proposing to the agency. And then related to these being competitive programs, we have committees that for each program that recommend which projects we fund each grant cycle. And then the last general requirement I wanted to highlight is that projects must be on public land and how long the project site must remain open for public recreation purposes does vary by program. So from 20 years at a minimum to forever, but in general, these are for public lands that are open long-term for public recreation. And then to navigate our different programs, you can check out that link to our website. Once you get there, you'll be able to drill down to each specific program, find all the information about each program that you might be interested in. You'll find our very detailed grant manuals. You'll see our grant cycle schedules, information about program specific webinars that some of us do hold. Those are longer webinars that get into the real nitty gritty about our programs. And you can also find information or links to our past webinars on our website. You'll also find information about how to access our online grant application system and of course our contact information. And even if you're not quite ready to apply, I do encourage folks just to check out our website just to get an idea of what kind of information and prep work would be needed to approach our grant programs. So first up, as far as our specific programs, is the Recreational Trails Program, or RTP, and I work specifically with this program. It is federally funded, and Oregon receives about $1.5 million a year that we grant out annually. 30% of those funds are set aside for motorized projects, so ATV and snowmobile trails, and the remaining funds are set aside for non-motorized trail projects, so, which can also include water trail projects. RTP requires a 20% match contribution towards the project. There is a $10,000 minimum grant request amount, and for non-motorized trail projects, $150,000 recommended maximum grant request. We most commonly fund trail development, trail restoration, or enhancement and other trailheads or supporting amenities. We also have some allowance to fund things like safety and education proposals, land acquisition. You can purchase equipment for trail building and maintenance, as well as conduct an assessment, sort of a large scale assessment of accessibility and maintenance needs of a trail system or maybe across your park system. All types of government land managers are eligible for RTP, so local, state, federal, and tribal governments. And nonprofits are also eligible for this program. You do have to be registered as a nonprofit for at least 3 years prior to applying. And in most of these situations, you would be applying on behalf of a public land manager or in partnership with them. So you would also need their approval and clearances to move forward with that type of ask. We will open again for application in September, looking like it'll be September 2nd of this year. And then applications will be due in mid-November. And for all of our programs, we do have our schedules online. Of course, some of these dates are subject to change, so just keep an eye on our website. The next program is the Land and Water Conservation Fund. This is another federal program that our department is responsible for administering for the state of Oregon. This program has about $4 million available per year, and that's made available through an annual grant cycle. Eligible applicants for this program include local governments, tribal governments, and state agencies. At least 60% of the funding is set aside for local and tribal governments, with the remaining funds for state agencies, but we can use more than 60% for local and tribal governments, depending on who applies each year. And this program has a 50% match requirement. LWCF funds all types of public outdoor recreation facilities, including trails. But something especially important to know about LWCF is that once you use LWCF funds in a park or along a trail corridor, the boundary of that park or trail must be dedicated to recreation forever. And changes to that boundary can be complicated and costly. So LWCF can be a really great fit for park properties that have already used LWCF funds or parks that your agency wants to ensure stays dedicated to recreation use in the long term. Linear trails can be a little tricky, as those can be tend to be at least more subject to boundary changes or adjustments along the trail corridor, especially if it's adjacent to a major road. In the example we always point to is the Bear Creek Greenway down in Southern Oregon. This longer line here on the map shows the boundary of the Bear Creek Greenway between I-5 and another major road. And of course that can cause complications, as sometimes road projects might change where the trail actually is. So just be cautious about thinking which properties you apply to this funding source for. Get a hold of our staff coordinator for advice early on. And then another thing, once you drill down onto our website, you can find a statewide map of all the properties across the state that are already dedicated to land and water. So there could be some strategy you want to think ahead to what projects you have coming up in those parks and really target this funding source for those. All right, the next and our biggest program right now is the local government grant program. It is currently open for application, and it typically opens every year right around January 1st. This year, this program has $34 million. That is a big jump from what we've seen in recent years, just because of how the funding works. And we hit a trigger where we are increasing the funding dedicated to this program. I think last year my slide said 7 million, so that's a big jump. Our department, we're largely funded by lottery, and this is just the portion of the lottery funds that are made available to local governments. All right, and the match requirement for this one does vary by the population of your city, county, or park district. It's between 20% to 50% match required. And then the application deadline varies by funding category. So you'll apply under one of these categories, either small grants, which are up to 100,000, large grants up to $1 million, or planning grants, and those are up to $50,000, but planning grants are limited by population. And those are more system-wide planning, big system planning, and really targeted on hiring consultants or outside parties to help you with the public outreach piece of the planning process. And this program funds all types of outdoor recreation and includes trails. And applicants are local governments, park districts, and port districts. And Mark Cowan, the coordinator for this program, just hosted a webinar, and you can find a link to that and copy of his slides on our website if you want to learn a lot more about the details. And like I said, nonprofits are only eligible for a couple. This program is not open to nonprofits, but if you are with a nonprofit who works closely with the local government, there could be an opportunity for you to help them or support them as they seek funding. We've also received a few questions recently on if local government, say a city, could apply for a project that's actually on federal land, and the answer to that would be no. That to be eligible for this program, it has to be locally owned and managed lands, public lands. All right, next is our ATV program. If you are involved with management of OHV trails and you aren't already connected to our ATV staff team, please reach out to them. I think most land managers and partners are pretty well aware of this program, but if it seems relevant and you're not already connected, definitely make contact with our staff here. Because this program also has educational resources and lots of other things like training opportunities and more. As far as the grant cycle goes, this program has about $11 million per biennium. Biennium is 2 years. Most of these funds are for operations and maintenance support for land managers who operate OHV trails, and for law enforcement and emergency medical services for off-highway vehicle riding areas. Then the remaining 10% is set aside for sort of the larger development and planning and land acquisition type proposals. This program also requires a 20% match, and similar to the Rec Trails program, this one is open to all levels of government, local, state, federal, and tribal, as well as nonprofits, nonprofit partners, as well as a nonprofit in Oregon who actually owns and operates a public riding area. And this program will open for application. Their next sort of big cycle is will open sometime this fall, so keep an eye on our website for dates. I've also heard from staff that they're potentially opening another grant cycle in the next couple months, just to spend down some remaining money for sort of the big projects like these development or planning or a little bit of everything. So keep an eye on our website or talk to our staff about this one. And last of our recreation grant programs is the County Opportunity Grant Program. This is open to counties for projects within their county operated campgrounds. It's funded by RV registration fees, and this program represents a portion of those RV registration fees and how it's made available to counties. And this could be relevant to you all if you have a county park that has some trail elements, whether it's a support facility for a trail system or you have trails within that county operated park. It could be relevant. The example we always like to give is Douglas County. This is the Umpqua Dunes campground, which serves for a staging area and for the dunes riding out in Douglas County. So it's one where there's a good nexus between trails and the camping facilities. And this one opens annually as well, and the next cycle will open in August. Then a couple more things. Even if you're not quite ready to apply to our grant programs, I do encourage you to follow that link. Each of our program pages has a number of resources on it that could be helpful to you just in general trail planning or looking for other sorts of resources. Each of our program pages also has a section on accessibility where we post a number of links. And I especially wanted to highlight this OPRD accessibility design standards that we have posted kind of all over our website right now. That came out of some recent legislation and is a good guidance document for all types of land managers in thinking about accessibility. So check us out for more than grants as well. And then last but not least is our Heritage Division. They also have a number of grant programs, and I always like to mention this because some of the grant programs they offer could overlap either with a trail project when it comes to things like interpretive signage or big interpretive type projects or programming, or for things that your agency might be involved with that's a little outside of recreation but could still be a nexus for you. So that you can find information about these programs at that same link that Steph shared in the chat. And that's all I got. So I will hand it back to you, Steph.
Thank you, Jodi. And we have a couple questions coming in through the Q&A as well. We are going to keep moving and answer things live at the end, and or you might get an answer typed to you in the Q&A. But we're going to go ahead and welcome Alan Thompson with the ODOT Oregon Community Paths program up next.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alan Thompson with the Community Paths program. Go ahead and get started. There you go. There I am. Work at ODOT headquarters in Salem, and I'm implement the new. It's not quite so new anymore. It's we're into our third cycle. I also do multimodal integration and great streets. So it's just one of the things. What we'll be discussing today is what is the Oregon Community Pass Program, how it's funded, how much money is available, who is eligible, what types of projects are eligible, and the key dates for 2024 and how we will be scoring. So OCP, which is Oregon Community Pass, is a grant program created in 2019. It funds off-system active transportation, meaning transportation facilities, not recreation, that are not primarily on or along a roadway. And when I say not recreation, it doesn't mean that there doesn't have to be a recreation component, because so many of our paths and everything can be used for both transportation purposes and for recreation purposes, but it must show some type of transportation purpose. It's biennial. It's started in 2020. The next cycle is 2024, starting in August, and it supports the investment in facilities. There are two things that we're looking for. Critical links, which we can think of as a first mile, last mile to destinations, biking and walking connections, schools, downtown, shopping, employment, and other destinations. And the other one is regional pass, longer distance pass serving communities, for example, the Bear Creek Greenway, which was mentioned earlier, or Portland's Springwater Corridor. So we can extend those because those can be used for both for both recreation and transportation. And we're looking at potentially expanding things. So for example, we have a grant right now that extends the Bear Creek Greenway into Ashland. And we're seeing if we can get a bridge built over a river to get it extended through. So here's an example of a critical link. This is Astoria Riverwalk lighting. It connects the destinations of the Maritime Museum and that area to local residences. It also seeks to go west to as a regional greenway, which then gets to the Oregon Coast bike route. And another example of a regional path is the Dundee Bypass Trail, which looks at doing a better linkage between Newburgh and Dundee. Rather than going on surface streets, it's going to parallel the vehicle bypass so that people won't have to be on high-speed roads with cars doing 40, 50 miles an hour. So how is it funded? We have various funding sources. We have the Transportation Alternatives Program, which is a federal program that funds an awful lot of active transportation and other things throughout the nation. The requirements are that it has to be a competitive grant, so that's what we do. We receive a formula allocation to the state. Large MPOs like Portland and Metro, Springfield, Eugene, and Salem, they also receive an allocation of that as well. And then we have some IIJA. The IIJA was the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and it gave us a huge amount of funds, but it was only for a couple of cycles. So we're using the remaining funds for this upcoming cycle. And the other source of funding is state multimodal active transportation fund. The bicycle excise tax, $15 on every bike over $15, that you fund this program. And a portion of the vehicle privilege tax, we receive that as well. Those come out to about $900,000 a year that we're getting, but that fluctuates depending upon the economy, how many bicycles are bought, how many vehicles are bought, and it's limited to cash on hand. Sometimes we'll subsidize that with transportation operating funds, which is the lawnmower tax. So people put gas in their lawnmowers, and that is those are funds that can be used that are not on a roadway. So it doesn't have to comply with the Constitution in terms of state highway funds being only used on roadways. So here's our 2024 solicitation. I mentioned earlier, it's a biennial grant program every 2 years. We've done some changes starting with this cycle. I mentioned that we're using the last of the IIJA. We're also front loading our 28 through 30 allocation that we anticipate receiving. So we're going to have a huge solicitation, 61 million. That's what's estimated. It will be federal only. And then project refinement, 400,000 to 750,000. We bump that up to where we can fund the full 30%. We've had issues before where applicants slash grantees will put together something for $250,000 that there's no way that it could fund what we need to get funded for to reach the full 30%. Excuse me. Construction is 1 million to 6 million. It used to be 200,000 to 4 million, and then we changed it to 200,000 to 6 million. And the reason why we're changing it this way is we're doing a large grant program and a small grant program. So large grants are federal because they have a smaller match, but they also have a heck of a lot more regulation and requirements, and the administrative cost to administer a construction grant federal is usually starts at about $100,000 and goes up from there. And that's just to administer it. Then we anticipate state funding, which will be in 2026. So we're going to alternate between federal every 2 years or every 4 years, and then state every 4 years. So federal, then state, then federal, then state. So we anticipate we've saved up enough money in our multimodal active transportation fund for about $7 to $9 million for the 2026 solicitation. And that will be 250,000 to 1 million, and that is construction only. So there's your small grant program that has a 30% match. So it makes it easier for small communities to be able to meet. And it also keeps larger communities sucking up, a $4 million or $5 million match of state funds and wiping out what the ability of small grants for other communities. So it's our way of making sure that we can get more grants throughout the state, particularly with the state funding. So who's eligible? Local governments, school districts, tribal governments, transit districts, a special government body. Sometimes it's like a park and recreation district or other unit of local government. Nonprofits are eligible now. The federal government has changed their rules. And so now nonprofits are eligible, but because the way it's structured in Oregon, you have to be a certified agency to be able to administer a federal grant, or ODOT will do it for you. No nonprofit is eligible or meets the criteria to be a certified agency. So therefore, ODOT would administer this grant for you. And for state funding, we highly recommend, because it is on a reimbursement basis, that a nonprofit partner with a local government agency that has the qualifications to construct, because we've had cases where the local PTA, Parent Teachers Association, wanted to apply in cycle one, and we're like, have you ever constructed anything before? And they're like, no. So it just makes it easier to partner with a local grant unless you have experience in construction. So what are the criteria? This is a long listing of the rules under OAR 36. I'm trying to remember. But project must be a transportation project open for public use. Project will assist in developing a system that will improve safety and access for people walking and bicycling. Development, construction, or reconstruction, major resurfacing, the usual of constructing a bike or footpath, or repair or rehabilitating one. We don't do maintenance, but we do rehabilitation. The project will improve critical link, regional path, or crossing. We're allowed to have crossings using either because there's a requirement in there that says that the funds for the MAT, Multimodal Active Transportation Fund, can't be used on highways. The one exception that we can is the path crossing, because you can't just stop right there at a major highway and say, all right, you're on your own crossing. So we allow that. The project will not require or rely upon subsidies from the department, that's ODOT, for ongoing operations. If the project is located on public property or within a public right-of-way, the project must be approved by the appropriate public agency or roadway governing body. So that'll be your local city. It might be ODOT if it's a state highway. That's all. Let's have the application. Match of 10.27 for federal, and total project cost. So the total project cost is the grant plus the match. And that is the total project cost. It's a weird way of figuring it out. A lot of people mistake that and don't get that right. The applicant must commit to begin the project within 2 years from the effective date of the agreement. So what type of projects? Project refinement, we talk about that as using maybe 30% design, basically up to, but not including engineering. So we're talking about alternatives analysis, of conceptual design and final alignment and preliminary research on environmental, because what'll happen next would be the NEPA, followed by right of way, followed by utilities, and then construction. So this is planning, not pre-construction. And we have it $400,000 to $750,000 per project. It narrows down the list of reasonable alternatives, researches the initial environmental concerns of what we can anticipate, estimate the development construction costs. We want to know what you estimate. So one of the things that come out of there is a full cost estimated tool that looks at the actual cost and budget and schedule. And we use that for a future construction grant. So it comes in very, very handy by having that already done. And then, of course, we want documented community input and support. We want letters from elected officials, from resolutions from city councils, etc. It's limited to the preliminary planning and provide the basis. So you get points in a construction grant if you've done a previous project refinement grant.
And Alan, I think, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think we better move on to our other speakers. So if we can invite folks to follow up on the website for additional info, that would
I'll just
be
give
great.
you this slide right here and then we're done. So there's our
Thanks
schedule.
so
Starts
much.
August 1st. There'll be something going out. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Alan. Really appreciate the great information. And next, we're going to move right away to Janine Belleque with the boating, with the Oregon State Marine Board. Thanks.
All right, everybody should hear me. I hope you can see my screen. So I'm gonna go through these kind of quick. And this is gonna be focused on boating access for both non-motorized, motorized, as well as ability to do some outreach and education for non-motorized boating activities. So,
and we can hear you and see your slides, Janine. You're not in kind of full screen mode with the slideshow. But it also works as is.
I think that display settings arrow at the top, if you hit swap presenter view under that. Display settings. Okay.
Does that work?
Yep, that'll do if you click on
that. All right, so our funding comes from fees that motorized boaters pay, so title, registration. Our federal funds are nationally competitive. They've got some very restrictive aspects. So Clean Vessel Act can do pump outs, dump stations for boating. We're hoping that some rule changes will happen on the federal end to actually allow us to put dump stations for non-motorized boating at some rafting sites. So that can be like the SCAT machine if you're familiar with those. And then the boating infrastructure does the large tie-up docks for boats that are cruising destinations along mostly the Columbia, a little bit of the Willamette, and then the coast. And then for our non-motorized funding, it's coming from the waterway access permits. That money is paid by any kind of a boat that is not powered by a motor at some point that is at least 10 feet in length. And that money goes right back out into access and then on water opportunities to for underserved communities. So who can apply? So with our construction, the boating facility grant, that's the physical improvements or purchasing property. You can see who's eligible for those. The asterisks, our rules currently allow our tribal governments to apply for the non-motorized physical improvements. And then nonprofits, you can't do a physical improvement grant. However, your role as a partner with cities, counties, and ports, state and federal agencies is huge. It takes lots of partnerships to make some of these facilities happen. And then the education boating component, that is non-motorized only. So if you want to have a chance to get some folks out on the water or you need equipment, that's the program to look at. So construction, we talk about construction, we're talking about everything from purchasing land to the whole permitting process, construction, as well as the technical assistance. So my staff can provide design, engineering, and permitting assistance to get you through the process of making those improvements. Or you can also have a consultant, and we can use grant funding to cover that. And then the education and outreach. It's everything from summer camps, outdoor schools, making videos in multi-language, purchasing adaptive equipment, and getting folks out on the water who normally wouldn't have an opportunity or need to build skills. So it's really increasing that opportunity to have a positive experience out on the water, whether it's in kayaks, rafts, canoes. It's really geared into that. So here's some examples of some of the education outreach types of projects that I just went over. And I will say, we've left the language broad because there's still some creative ideas out there, and we don't want somebody to get stuck with, oh, we can only buy equipment, or we can only take somebody out. You've got some ideas on how to increase opportunities for people to have a positive experience doing non-motorized boating, give me a call, drop me an email, and let's have a talk about it. Oh. So that was one of our summer camps we funded. We're really trying to promote life jacket wear. And so the kids all got together and made a very short video to help promote wearing life jackets. And then match. So all of our programs have a minimum of 25% match. It can come in a variety of different ways. Cash is wonderful, but we recognize often labor, materials, equipment, and then the administration of a grant are also key parts of that match. So some big pieces for this. So we do operate on a 2-year budget. Our current budget ends June 30th of 25. And so everything has to be done and completed by the end of our budget. If your project is under 50,000, you should really look at our small grant program. It's a faster program, shorter application, has a few less strings associated with it, and we can be much more responsive. For our other program that we're talking about now, we don't have a maximum. The minimum is really, if you're $51,000 or $50,900, that would be kind of the minimum. And then permit status is very significant for any on the ground projects. It takes many years to get through the permitting projects. It doesn't matter whether it's a motorized improvement or a non-motorized. It takes years to get through it. So the status of your permits is one of our key factors in deciding funding. We do allow the public to comment on all of the grant applications. And as well as we do tribal consultation on any projects that have ground disturbance or in areas that, or has to do with any kind of tribal land recognitions. We want to make sure that our tribal nations are okay with what's being proposed. And these go through our board approval. So my board meets quarterly, and they have the final decision on whether or not something is approved or not. So we have 1 cycle left in our current budget. It's a tight window, but at this point, by the time my board approves it, you've got about 9 months to get it completed. And what's not on here is we will start accepting applications for our cycle 1 of our new budget. So that would be coming in November of 24 through March of 25. And that would be for consideration for monies that we would hopefully have in hand by July 1st of 25. And those would have to be spent within that 2-year period. So June 30th of 27. And then small grants. So small grants are for motorized or non-motorized access, as well as education and increasing opportunity. So here's a couple examples. We worked with a veterans group to buy a raft trailer. They were having to work with a whole bunch of folks to see whose pickup was available when, to figure out if they could go on a trip. We re-roofed a restroom, crack sealed a parking lot, covered pool time to have huli training, which is for outrigger canoes and kayaks, funded a pump out station, some equipment for an outdoor school, a new gangway decking. So it really varies whether it's an access improvement or trying to get people out to experience non-motorized boating. So the cool thing about this is there is no application deadline. We take these at any time on a first come, first served basis until our funding is exhausted. All work has to be done by the biennium, 50,000 total cost or less. Our maximum amount is 30, minimum match is 25%. And the asterisk on the tribal consultation really depends on what that project is. Whether there's ground disturbance or you're proposing to do land recognitions or plant identifications, anything that we believe needs to go back to the tribes to consult with them on. And then the big part is our director has authority. So much faster process. We can be more responsive to things. And like I said, no application deadline, apply when things come up. We will see a lot of things come in associated with storm damage, where we need to help get something fixed and serviceable again, as well as opportunities that arise from many nonprofits or non-governmental organizations. And then partnerships. Partnerships are huge for everything. These are just some examples, and you can see there's everything from individuals to other agencies to non-governmental organizations. So partnerships are a big part of it. And then that's my information. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And if you have any questions, please put it in the Q&A and I'll start responding to those. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. We are running a little behind on our webinar schedule for today, so I just want to invite our upcoming speakers, if you can all do your best to keep things within a 5-minute time frame so we hear from all our scheduled speakers, and then I will cover a few other things at the very end, and if there are folks who have to leave us at 1 p.m. if we go a little bit over, know that we will post the full recording on our blog. Next up, I welcome Reva Gillman with the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund. Thanks for joining us, Reva.
Thank you, Steph. Good afternoon, everybody. So as Steph said, I'm Reva Gillman. I'm the Oregon Conservation and Recreation Fund Grant Coordinator. And I'm going to be using the acronym OCRF to refer to the program because it's a little bit of a mouthful. And everyone can see my slides, correct? I'm hoping.
Yes, looks great.
So the OCRF was formed within the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife for the purpose of protecting and enhancing species within the Oregon Conservation Strategy, and also to create new opportunities for outdoor recreation. So we're kind of in that sweet spot combination between conservation and recreation. And here's our advisory committee. We have a very engaged and passionate, dedicated advisory committee. They offer diverse perspectives from all around the state to help make decisions. They review the projects that we receive and advise the ODFW and Fish and Wildlife Commission. We have monthly meetings, and anyone is welcome to attend to learn more about the OCRF if interested. And here's our mission statements. So these are from our founding legislation. The OCRF was founded in 2019, so we're pretty new, by the Oregon legislature with the mandate of implementing the Oregon conservation and nearshore strategies and expanding outdoor recreation, investing in science and research to inform management of fish, wildlife, and their habitats, striving for healthy ecosystems, helping Oregonians take actions through education, science, recreation to think about the future of Oregon for all of us, and connecting underserved communities to the outdoors, which is this outdoor equity piece that that's one of the pillars in the foundation of OCRF. So we want all Oregonians out in nature in a conservation focused way so that we can protect Oregon as a whole, and outdoor equity is crucial in what OCRF wants to do and the projects we continue to fund. So we encourage applicants to think about how they can pull outdoor equity into their projects. So the OCRF receives funding from private donations, but mostly from public funds from the Oregon legislature. So currently the largest pot of funding that we're working with is from the drought package, and the OCRF currently holds around 2.7 million in drought funds. They're specifically earmarked for drought projects, so projects that address the impacts of drought, and we're prioritizing the projects that address drought, wildfire, aquatic habitat resilience, and promoting awareness of the impacts from drought and climate change in Oregon. So our eligibility, the OCRF offers pretty broad applicant eligibility. So any tribe, local, state, federal agency, nonprofits, universities, all eligible to apply. Just not for-profit organizations, but they could partner with any of the eligible entities. And also on this slide, we have the grant review criteria here. So as you can see, submitted projects are scored on clarity, cost efficiency, shovel readiness, outdoor equity, if they have a high impact on individuals or target species or habitats, track record, partnerships leveraged, measurability, and of course, alignment with Oregon Conservation Strategy and OCRF program priorities. And we do run a competitive granting program. We open 2 grant cycles per year, usually a spring and fall cycle. Project awards are typically capped at $50,000. So we're a pretty small grant program. However, we just raised the project maximum to $140,000 for those drought projects that I was just talking about. And our grant periods are usually 1 to 3 years. So actually our current grant cycle, our spring 2024 grant cycle, is now open and accepting applications until March 26th. So you still have some time to apply if anyone's interested. And I advise you to go check out that QR code, which links to our website if interested in applying. So for this grant cycle, we're looking to fund those projects that address drought on Oregon's fish, wildlife, and their habitats, as well as outdoor equity and conservation and recreation. So after the extensive review process that they will go through, the projects that will then go to the Fish and Wildlife Commission on June 14th in this recent cycle for approval. And we're looking to grant about 1 million in total projects. So overall, OCRF has funded 140 projects in Oregon so far in ecoregions all over Oregon, as shown on the map here. The program has awarded $5 million towards funding these conservation recreation projects. And here I've just highlighted a few trails projects that are successful trails projects that OCRF has funded in the past, as I thought this might be of interest to this group. So we've funded projects such as the Owens Farm Healthy Outdoors for All Universally Accessible Trail Partnership by the Greenbelt Land Trust. Also, there was one led by Source One Serenity, the Boulder Creek Wilderness Trails project. They actually engaged veterans with the trail work, and it was a very successful project. And if you're interested to learn more, here's our website and the QR code again. You can go to our website to learn more about all the funded projects we have funded. You can read more about the great conservation and recreation work that's being done around the state. And you can also learn more about the application process if you're interested. So thank you so much. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out to me, Reva Gillman. My info is up there. Happy to answer any questions about applying or projects that you want to run by me. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Reva. Appreciate all the great information about OCRF. Next up, we're going to welcome Staj Olson with Travel Oregon.
Okay, hello everyone. Can you see my slides? Yes?
Yes, looks great.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you, Steph, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I apologize. I am getting over a cold, so if I start coughing, I hope that doesn't happen. So yes, I'm with Travel Oregon, and I will be sharing just a couple programs we have that are available to different organizations that work in the trail space. So just wanted to share, I am not on our investments team. Actually, I'm on our destination services team, which sits within the destination stewardship team. And but we do have an investments department now that handles our competitive grants program, and they have all of the details and would be the people to ever speak to if you have specific questions. But I'll just give a high level overview of our competitive grant program. It's 10% of the transient lodging tax that comes through to the state is directed to the competitive grant program. We award grants for projects that contribute to the development and improvement of communities throughout the state by means of enhancement, expansion, and promotion of the tourism industry. This began in 2016, and so you can see we've funded $20.2 million in 377 projects since then. This last grant cycle, we really focused on, again, the enhancement and expansions of tourism infrastructure and or tourism promotion, all in the area of accessibility and inclusivity. It's been a big focus of ours. This grant cycle was $3.6 million and awarded 56 projects. And again, that's for, like I said, all tourism type related projects. So trails was probably a small portion of this, but there was a handful of accessible mountain bike assessments, hiking trails, infrastructure improvements such as signage and wayfinding. So there is often, trail projects definitely fall within the tourism industry purview and qualify often for our grant programs. Like I said, I don't have a ton of information, but our next funding cycle is tentatively set for this coming late summer, early fall. And I have the link here for where you can find much more information about our grant program. Just one tip I did want to share is that we work really closely with the state's 7 regional destination management organizations. And they also often have their own competitive grant programs. And in our competitive grant program, they are extremely important to have relationships with. We often will not fund a project unless you have reached out and have a relationship with your RDMO. So if that's something you haven't done, I highly recommend you do. And that's a link to find your regional entity down there. I'm just going to skip ahead for sake of time and share another program we have is technical assistance and one-on-one consultations. So right now we are providing free technical assistance for tourism industry related organizations and businesses looking to develop or steward experiences in your Oregon destination. And so these ones in dark blue up top we currently have online consultation forms for, where again, you can receive this direct consultation with experts and then follow-up support in the spaces of culinary and agritourism. This can relate to trails sometimes, as there are, food trails. There's different types of trails related to culinary, dark sky tourism development, and tour operators, guides, and outfitters, maybe who are potentially working on trails and providing experiences on trails. And then I'm excited to share we have 4 new areas coming online later this spring, which will be more applicable to folks working in the trail space: destination recreation asset mapping, artificial intelligence. Not sure if that one will relate to trails, but potentially. And then recreation asset, it's supposed to say feasibility and concept planning, and then trail stewardship and development support. And again, there will be a lot more information about this, but I just wanted to really highlight that these are really great to have dedicated one-on-one support, where you could get help with projects even pre-planning before you might ever want to apply for a grant. You could get support with writing a grant and applying to grants. So helpful in this space. And lastly, I'll just share this link, the industry.traveloregon.com/newsletter, is just where we always share all of our programming and anytime a grant opens or new programs open. So definitely sign up for that if you're interested. And thanks.
Thanks so much, Staj. I'm going to invite our last speaker, Dan Miller, to come on to the mic and the screen. And I know we're really nearing 1 o'clock, but just reminding folks that if you do have to leave, we will post the full recording on our blog and within the next couple of days. Thanks for joining us, Dan.
Thanks, Steph. Hey, my name's Dan Miller. I am with the National Park Service's Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Program, or RTCA. We are the conservation and outdoor recreation community assistance program of NPS. And RTCA, or Rivers, Trails, and Conservation Assistance, extends the experience and expertise of the National Park Service to locally led, locally driven projects. Nonprofits can apply, same with local, state, or federal governments, tribes, and coalitions. So we provide assistance to all 50 states and US protectorates. We've been in business for well over 30 years, and we operate on an annual application process. Like a grant, but instead of getting money, what you get is technical assistance, RTCA staff to help you on your project. Our applications close, the grant window for applications closes March 1st. So in terms of how we work, we respond to requests of assistance. So we don't provide funding again. We provide staff to come and work along with you and your partners to help co-facilitate efforts, help you plan, design whatever your project needs. We focus on facilitation, mediation, and getting consensus amongst your project stakeholders and the general community. Our projects last about 1 to 3 years. And again, we don't come with money. What we come with is technical assistance. So I'm going to skip a little bit ahead here just to keep us on track here. RTCA, some of the things we typically
We just lost, oh, you're back. We lost your audio for a second there. But
I'm going to stop my video just in case it's a connection thing. We also work on engaging youth, underserved populations, climate resiliency and mitigating natural disasters, and conserving the lands and waters. So in terms of how to apply, You can go to nps.gov/RTCA to learn all about it. There's different links here, but the first thing is kind of take a look at RTCA's website, look at some of the projects we've worked on. You can reach out to one of the project managers, and all the contacts are on the website. And then you can also download and then again, you need to get applications in every March 1st. You can contact us early with a draft application, and we'll help you go through and develop a better application and make sure that your project is a good fit for the program. When you do apply, of course, you want the completed application form. You want a site location map, minimum of 3 commitment letters, and then any supplementary information that will help us to make a better judgment on your application. Projects are expected to accomplish results. We want you to define the roles and contributions of project partners, including yourself. We want to see that there is broad community support for the project, or at least in terms of stakeholders. And ideally, the project fits within our focus areas that I talked about earlier. So again, you can go to nps.gov/RTCA to learn about our program and about the type of assistance that we offer. Download an application and get a contact for your state. In Oregon, the contacts are myself, which my email is listed here, or Brianna Truden, and Bree's email is listed below. So that's it for NPS and RTCA. Encourage you to reach out if you have any questions.
Thanks so much to Dan and to all of our speakers. And our speakers have been doing a great job of answering questions in the Q&A feature itself. So if you have put a question in the Q&A, check back there. You might have an answer in writing. I'm going to wrap us up with just sharing a few more opportunities that are out there for folks to look for. The first one I want to mention is the Federal Lands Access Program. This is a grant program that can fund really large projects that are on or adjacent to federal lands. They're not anticipating a new cycle for this one until January 2026, but these are big involved grant applications. So if you have a big trail project on federal lands, it is good to look early and start kind of talking to partners and everything very early on. So invite folks to check that out if you're not familiar. Oregon gets a fairly large percentage of the national FLAP funding because of our percentage of public lands in the state. Our friends over at American Trails have a couple of different Trails grants programs. The next one we expect to see open later this fall is their Trails Capacity Program. This is one of those few programs that fund trail maintenance and stewardship and research and education on national forest lands. So keep an eye out for that later this fall if that is your need. The Oregon Parks Foundation through the Oregon Community Foundation has very small grants. So if you have a, just a small project grant need, I invite you to check that out. Their cycle goes through March 6th, or their requests are due March 6th, and that's again a very small grant program. For folks who are working with trails within the transportation network space, you might want to look into transportation growth management planning grants. And these planning grants are really more suited to kind of trail system master plans or kind of active transportation network planning projects. So if you really have a bigger kind of community planning project to do that's not just related to one very specific trail, but how a whole system fits together, definitely encourage you to check out that program. They don't have new cycle information posted yet, but I would expect to see new cycle info posted later this spring. We are also right now nearing the deadline for a RAISE grant cycle. This is through the U.S. Department of Transportation. And again, these are larger transportation projects of which trails are eligible and have historically been very competitive projects. It takes a lot of local and regional buy-in for this kind of grant. So if you haven't started the process for this year yet, it's probably too late, but do keep an eye on this kind of funding for the future and start having those conversations with folks in your region about queuing up big trail projects for federal funding cycles in the future. And some other things just to explore generally. There's often local opportunities through metropolitan planning organizations or MPOs or soil and water conservation districts, or through local parks or parks districts, or friends of parks often have small opportunities. So make sure to just look locally at what's available. In the Portland metro area, Metro has both, kind of things on both the parks and nature side and the transportation side through nature and neighborhoods, or through regional travel options and others. Rails to Trails Conservancy has a national fund, and then lots of industry partners have some kind of philanthropic arm. So spend some time looking at big outdoor brands, and you can see what their grant programs apply. Often nonprofits are the eligible entities for those industry funds. Sometimes they're broader than that, often schools as well. Some fund infrastructure, but a lot of them fund programs or things with educational elements. So in wrapping up, just wanted to again thank all of today's presenters, and thanks folks for coming. Sorry we didn't have more time for Q&A at the end, but we will post the full recording of this presentation on the Oregon Trails Coalition blog, along with links to all of the programs that were shared today, to make those easy to find. And everyone who joined us today, I can vouch for being generous, helpful individuals. So I hope if you do have specific questions after today's webinar and after checking out those websites, that you don't hesitate to reach out and learn more and find out if what you have in mind is a good fit for those programs. So big thanks to everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. I should also remind folks that next Tuesday at the same time, we're hosting a webinar that is specifically about working with federal land managers to fund trails on federal lands. So not just through competitive grant programs, but the different colors of funding that federal land managers may be able to apply to trails, and how to work with your local forest or ranger district staff or local BLM unit to learn how you might be able to get trails onto different funding priority lists and everything internally with those federal agencies. So hope if that is what you're trying to do, you'll join us next week. And thank you everyone for your work and all you do for trails.